I imagine there's going to be more people that come in as we go, but great to see you all. My name is Matt Sitter. I'm CEO of AFN, partner at Sixth Wing. Uh, One of our fundamental beliefs with AFN is that change is where opportunity happens. Best way to find opportunity and change is a network that's diverse in experience, expertise, and perspective. We have run a CEO network for a while, and as we were looking at some of the things that we found to be particularly important, particularly around the network angle, we found that the chief of staff was actually the personalization of that particular feature, the network in some way. And so we wanted a way to actually boost the community um, for chiefs of staff and give us a place where let's talk about what theory into practice actually means. What are you actually doing in your jobs and how can you help each other out? My partners in this endeavor, so John Prevotera, he is actually traveling right now. He's not going to be on today. Sylvia has been with us for a long time. She's been extraordinary help. And then we got Betsy, who's our eye in the sky. If you got any technical problems or anything like that, or she's helping us with marketing. A lot of times she does pop on because she is our chief of staff as well. She's your person there. Today, we have a ton of new people, so I'll talk through a little bit about what we do, but a lot of folks related to the Commit Foundation, so good to see you all, and very excited to have you participating here. Last housekeeping thing that I'll mention, Sylvia was bringing this up. We had an opportunity to meet Christina and a few of our other Chief of Staff members face-to-face out in Colorado Springs. It was awesome to be able to hang out. Spectacular event. And the backdrop of it, it looked like it was fake. It was so beautiful there, but really good event. Christina, anything you wanna say on that?
It was amazing. And I want to say, I didn't join your dinner. It was a dinner between John and Jason and I, and you guys decided to join our dinner.
Okay,
So you're welcome.
fair enough. We crashed your yes, thank you for that. We crashed your dinner, and you still got to see some of the craziness that goes on behind the scenes. Good stuff. And Brittany, good to see you. All right, so what we do within this is I'm going to share a couple slides just to frame us around a particular topic, and then we'll go into the experiences of all you. If you got your camera on, there's going to be a question asked to you, so just be prepared around that. But it's a nice, friendly atmosphere, and we're just all here to learn. So when you guys can see my slides, if I can get a thumbs up from you all, that'd be great. Okay, perfect. Today we're going to talk about burnout and resilience, and thinking about this from the perspective of the chief of staff as well. There's three identities that we focus on related to the chief of staff position. The first is chief network officer. You know who's who and what makes them tick, um, because a lot of times you have to work through these people. You have to be an expert on influence, not authority, because oftentimes they're not reporting to you. So understanding the network is vitally important. You have to be a master of time. So this is both the use of your time and everyone else's. A lot of the way that you get information is through using other people's time. So you can't waste it at all. Oftentimes this means that you are exceptional at running some of the most important meetings within your organization. And the last identity that we talk about is the vision Sherpa. So you might not be coming up with the vision for the company, but you're carrying the bag. You're helping everyone else to connect the dots on what the direction is that you're going. The reason why we're talking about burnout and resilience is that it will impact your organization in some way, shape, or form. We know that the amount of burnout that is out there since the pandemic is up higher. We haven't had a lot of recovery that's going on. So we're seeing burnout on a consistent basis in a lot of organizations. It is a big risk factor to organizations. People are not able to be as capable on the decisions that they need to make. They're not performing as well as they want to a lot of times. And so for you as a chief of staff, being aware of this is going to help for yourself and for others. If you can build out a resilient organization as well, that becomes a strategic advantage for your organization. Can you help people recover faster? You guys are going to be able to run that marathon that much faster. So there's a couple things that we can think about in terms of burnout factors on an individual basis versus a team basis. I'm not going to spend any time going through these. I'll let you read the list that's here. But thinking about as we go through, what are some of the individual factors that you might think about for yourself? Sometimes we think about this as just like, oh, I'm just not feeling great this week, or, I really don't like this company. A lot of times when we see that mismatch between values, that can be indicative of burnout rather than like your values changing or the company's values changing. So something to be able to keep in mind there. Um, and what we also know about burnout is that it can be contagious with folks. So can you actually build some resilience in on the people who you are seeing it earlier than others? Thinking about some of the incentives that organizations actually have around burnout. So sometimes it becomes a part of the culture. It can become a badge of honor where people are just cranking nonstop and they don't get that opportunity to recover, or they can be hiding it overall because it'll be seen as a sign of weakness. So this can very much find its way into the different cultures that are out there. I also want us to think about the degrees of burnout that occur. Nick Petrie, who we've done a bunch of work with, he is a burnout expert and where we've been able to learn a ton from. If you think about this just in terms of like, how your skin might get burned first versus second versus third. Okay, a lot of us will exist in first degree burn and we will exist there for a long time because you can do some things to help you recover on it. Second, you're getting a little more serious about this, and it might require you to take 1-2 weeks off, make some changes within your life to actually be sustainable. Third degree burn is where it's like there's not going to be much that fixes here. You actually are going to have to drop out of your organization for a little while, change things significantly within your life to be able to come back in some way. So I think we all understand what it feels like to be in that first degree burn, maybe understand second and third degree, but understand that this is pretty commonplace. When someone gets to the third degree burn, that's when things are very, very serious and you need exceptional interventions to help you out. As we think about this too, think about the physiological element to this. A lot of times when we're thinking about the reason why we've got burnout as a word is it seems to be a physical sensation around it. So thinking about when we look at challenges, there's the cortisol response, which is like heavy anxiety, stress, a little bit more damaging to your system overall. Testosterone is something that's boosting your challenge or confidence. When you have some of these challenges or threats that are coming up, your body has a physical response. When we're thinking about burnout with people, a lot of times they have some sort of feeling that they have going along with that. That can be a signal that we can learn to be aware of for ourselves and can watch out for with other people. As we think about some of the signals of strain to be able to watch out for, and if you'd like these slides, just contact us afterwards. We'll make sure that you can get them. Upper right, to the right of that red line is really where we want to be living as much as possible relative to how we are dealing with strain. Okay, so stress, you can have good stress that actually helps you to perform better. When we're on the left-hand side, where you've got anxiety, worry, apathy, boredom, that is where you're actually feeling the pain and downside of much of what can happen around strain and stress for you. And some of the places that you can actually see that in the individual and team columns, these are places where you'll actually see things change within the organization. Okay, so some of the questions that we're going to be looking at today, when we're thinking about ourselves, because if we are able to look internally at what's going on with us, that can help us develop the empathy to look for what's going on with other people. So we'll start out by thinking about what happens to us as individuals. How do you feel like you respond when things are stressful? And what signals are you noticing when that's going on? What are you seeing in others as chief of staff, as that chief network officer? You probably are pretty good at recognizing this to begin with, but we all recognize this in different ways. So we want to be able to pull that out. And then finally, how can we learn from each other on how to be more resilient ourselves and help others be more resilient? All right, so that's it for slides. Um, let's start with Brittany on this because she's been here before and she knows the drill. Brittany, how do you feel like you respond with pressure? What are some of the things that you see in yourself?
It's a great topic for me because I went through like a huge burnout over this last year and I'm like just getting back onto the horse and like just got a new job.
Congrats.
I've been thank you. So I've been contracted with them for a while, so I'm familiar and I was like, oh no, I feel good. I know what I'm getting into. And then when it became official, 2, 3 days in, I start feeling like I'm about to have a panic attack because now
Okay.
it's real and there's a lot of pressure. And I see myself like I'm slower to respond when people are asking me for updates. I'm like scrambling to decide what my priority is. Um, and I'm honestly like having a hard time. Last week, I feel better now, guys, but
Hmm.
but because I had all of these things all at once, I was starting to feel like the pressure was on. I didn't want to look foolish, like I didn't know what I was doing or how to prioritize what I was working on. So I started shutting everyone out and
Okay.
recognized that I was going down that bad path of like, oh, I'm in like the stage one, like you had. I was in between like a 2 to maybe 3 before all of this, and then took time to heal myself and calm down and recognize like, okay, how can I develop that resiliency? So now when I start to panic, I can reassess what am I doing?
Okay.
What is the priority? And remember to reach out to my team members who don't think that I'm foolish because I have my specialties and they have theirs and they're there to
Right.
help me just like I'm there to help them and falling back on like the trust that I built with this team.
Great. Okay. And so I think one of the things you pointed out is like, hey, you start feeling panicky. Okay. I think it is really hard for us to self-assess in that moment. It gets really easy to, allow your decision making to go out the window. The fact that you were able to say, like, hey, I recognize that in myself. Sometimes what we can do as the tool that we can use on this is just saying, like, hey, what's the emotion that I'm feeling right now? That actually gives us enough physical space from the emotion itself to start to engage more of the logic circuits on, like, all right, here's what I'm feeling. I can go to the why and I can go to what I can do about it. But that ability to say, like, all right, if things feel a little off, how can I go back and just call out what I'm feeling? So that's great.
Thanks.
Josh, what about you? When you're feeling some high pressure, how do you respond?
Um, the word that the two words that came to mind is I get furiously productive, like just
Okay.
angrily, like watch me power through this, which is only good for like a day or two, maybe like a week. And so that's how I deal with like when you think
Yeah.
the tiger's chasing you down, right? Like just get angry and run faster. But for me, it ends up like I won't take it out on my coworkers. I'll end up taking it out on my family just through frustration
Okay.
and being grumpy and surly. And so that's usually like my first signal is that my wife, kind of gives me the eye roll or something, or the girls are like, "Oh, what happened to you, Dad?" Um,
Uh-huh.
and they'll just kind of back away. And so I'm like, "Oh man, something must be going on." And so that's usually my first cue. Um, as far as how I deal with it, I think just trying to be rational and like, hey, nothing is threatening, you personally or your family. It is stressful, but you can handle it. And so just trying to like rationalize through some of that and just realize that like your family's okay, you're okay, right? And
Hmm.
that you're going to get through it.
Okay. Yeah, and I would say this is something that we really commonly see for the reaction to, like, that getting a little bit unsteady. I'm just going to run harder. And where this particularly comes into play is with those people who are high performers, right? High performers, they say, like, oh, if I just work harder, everything's going to be fine. And Josh, I think it's really interesting when you're talking about, if any of you have seen Severance, the whole point of the show Severance is you can't actually, as hard as you try, you can't separate work from home. But people aren't always showing up the same in those two different places, and they're impacting each other. All right. So being able it's great that you've got that signal, like your wife can be the canary in the coal mine. Her, you know, giving you a look can help you actually get to that next step. Jordan, what about you? Thinking about pressure, what do you feel when you're feeling that pressure? What's it physically feel like?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think my wife has a similar response, so that hers is more than just a look, which is good, which is what I need. But yeah, unfortunately, so it's kind of, I guess it happens in stages, right? Too, just kind of like the stages of the burn there. So I think at first, when that pressure ramps up, kind of the fight or flight response, kicks in. I tend to increase, the amount of time that I'm working. I run faster to avoid the tiger. But that's only sustainable for a certain amount of time, right? And then, unfortunately, it tends to lead to, things kind of leaking outside of, the office that I sit in for 10 hours a day, right? So
Mhm.
that's really what starts to happen, and I'm experiencing this today. And through this enormous project that I'm working on, and it's it's kind of a bummer. Yeah, I mean, it stinks, and I would say, at some point the fatigue of running extra hard catches up, right?
Yep.
And then I find myself at work just, generally speaking, changing my leadership style almost. And what I mean by that is, normally I'm, obviously very kind of inclusive. It's more of a democratic style. And I find that, that starts to wane, and it becomes more of, dictator is a strong word, but it becomes, that leadership style changes in terms of my output, and the
Yeah.
conversations that I use, and the vernacular, and all of those things really start to change over time. Again, that certainly doesn't happen at first. It takes a lot to get there. But once it starts to seep in, it becomes difficult to go back to change around until that pressure is relieved in a significant way.
Yeah. And sometimes you can even watch yourself. You're like, I'm not behaving the way that I want to, but I just can't help it right now.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's like I'm aware of it, and yet
Yeah.
it's not as easy just to flip a switch. And I really, try, especially with the home stuff, but it's not easy.
So the fight or flight response, which you brought up very specifically. Okay, so let's not say that that's a bad thing. This is totally natural.
Yeah.
When we were running away from the lions on the savannah, we needed that activation to be able to get there. One of the problems that we've got is when our brain can and our body can't distinguish between the types of stress that we're having. So your body is getting all ratcheted up. You've got the testosterone and cortisol that's flooding your body. When we were running away from the lions and tigers, we had that release. You actually had a physical release that was associated with that. If you stay in your office, which is what we have a tendency to do, that stuff doesn't get a chance to go anywhere. And so thinking about like, all right, when I've got one of these moments, when are you going to have time to go for a walk, to do some sort of vigorous activity that will help flush some of that out of our body? But this fight or flight response is totally natural. This is what your body is supposed to do. And so keep in mind that that's there, but how can you actually, once you've accepted that, how are you going to manage that in some way? That is why, a physical activity regime is really important, but particularly when you're feeling this stress, what can you do to flush that out as well? Quentin, good to see you. Tell us about, how do you feel when stress hits? What's that look like for you?
When it hits, it feels like anxiety. It feels like there's a physical
Okay.
pressure, and I've been listening. But I've been doing a couple of things to circumvent that. One, practically, is I don't eat lunch, nor do I really eat breakfast. So before I start running on fumes, I make an intention to go and get some eggs or just put something in my body before I get too crazy. And then also making the intention to, when possible, to literally just get up out of my office at home and walk outside and sit outside for 5 minutes.
Okay.
In my office space, frankly, I'm in the lower level of my home and don't get a lot of sunlight. I work all the way through, as I think many of us probably do. I don't give myself much of a break. Frankly, I'm like, why do I have to go pee? Like, it takes up time. But I do make the intention, especially when I feel that physical
Okay.
anxiety, that physical pressure. Is like, okay, pause, just go outside for 5 minutes, feel the sun, let my like put my phone down, literally just sit away or like go away for
Okay.
a moment, and it helps. It really does help. And then, of course, I also been learning. I post-its all over to actually write down my thoughts because I realize my
Okay.
cognition, isn't as reliable as I'd like it to be. And I think a lot of us in this profession kind of feel like we, have a lot on our minds. But I write down notes, and even if it's a meeting that I plan to have tomorrow, if I had a thought that randomly enters my head about that, I'll jot it down so that it's out of my head and it's taken care of to deal with later.
Okay, yeah, and like being able to flush some of those thoughts out of your head, that can create some clarity. They're not just rattling around, combating those other thoughts that are out there. It does turn out that, again, physiological response, sometimes we got to eat, sometimes we got to go to the bathroom, normal stuff, right? But it's like, hey, let's just accept who we are and that we're human beings and we are animals as well, and we got to do some of this stuff. Drew, what about you when you're thinking about pressure? Anything that you can add to what we've heard so far? Because we've heard about anxiety, we've heard about the physical stuff, like being able to take a break. How's this landing with you?
Hey, thanks for asking. So the bigger question that I also ask is it a process? Is it a person? Is it a thing that I try to frame it, person, place, or thing kind of thing? And if it's a place, then I try to go out for the walks from the other people have done. But the big thing that I figured out recently that I took as a tool was if I have to have a conversation with somebody, I'll grab my phone on that walk. You might have seen these things, and I will have that conversation on the phone with me to myself, and then I'll go back and look at it again like 5 minutes later, or maybe an hour later, and says, would I want to hear that if I was told that? Like, hey man, how that came off didn't go well, or man, you
Yeah,
really
yeah,
suck, or you're an idiot, or whatever. And then I'll play it back to myself like, okay, I'm not going to send that right now. I'm going to wait until I have that conversation, and then I'll find a better place in my head or my heart to say, okay, it's not a personal thing. It could be just a business process that I'm trying to help them figure out, but they haven't
right.
through them. So that's just another tool that I've kind of figured out recently in the last couple of months. So to
Great.
reflect back to myself. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think to be totally clear, we're emotional animals first, and then we engage logic second. That is not just some people, that is everyone that's out there, right? And it's just how quickly we can switch to how we are thinking about things with a logic basis from that emotional basis. Like we all have different mechanisms that we use to do so. If you're like, hey, recording myself and being able to listen back helps me actually figure that out, that's hugely helpful. That can be your means of actually processing around
Yeah.
it.
Yep. Exactly.
David, anything you'd add in terms of when you're feeling stressed, starting your own business, that's not that stressful. What's that feel like to you, and what's your recovery mechanism?
I love how you just like, oh, me by now, you'll just open up that regardless of the question, I'm just going to drop something that's helpful. So, I like to think everybody's had very good answers here. And, there's the general stress and general burnout. And then there's, stress that comes up. A friend of mine, just to let you know how bad things can get, she recently retired intelligence analyst. She's dealt with depression in her life. She spent about the first 15 months sleeping. I kid you not. I think she left the house maybe 4 times in that year after a 20-year burnout career with little support, including 1 tour of duty in Iraq as an analyst and 4 or 5 year-long terms covering counterterrorism and insurgency. So when I tell you this stuff can accumulate, yeah, it can. And she's just like, I just slept 18 hours today, and then I went on my computer. So that's a forewarning. Please don't let this build up for 20 years, because I've been nursing my friend who's in her 50s emotionally on that for like the last year and a half, and it is real, and your immune system will crash.
Mm-hmm.
On that note, I like, Drew, your comments. We all get irritable. Quentin, having food, and your prefrontal cortex is the only part of your brain that gets tired, and it runs a lot on focusing with dopamine, which is your body uses protein, and your brain uses glycogen. So when you don't have the self-control breaks in your prefrontal cortex because you don't have the fuel for it, a lot of nasty stuff is going to come out. And it's like shooting a gun. As soon as it comes out, you cannot take it back. You really can't. And I mean, I get it. My dad was a paratrooper in the Army, and his dad, my grandpa, was a Marine drill instructor. I heard every single curse word you could know by 6 years old. And there are a lot of very choice words that I grew up with that was like an R. Lee Ermey impression, generally. So having a talent for being able to use that is hilarious, but not very good in the workplace, as much as sometimes we like to get it out. And I think it's really, for me, it's, if I feel like having an outburst, it's like calming myself down, even if it's venting it out on the phone, like I said, Drew, with you, on a more individualized basis. One of the most powerful things, and I was going to bring this up, it's a book by Naomi Quenk. It's Quenk. I'll put this thing on link. It's called Was That Really Me? And for those of you familiar with 16 personality stuff, it goes into Carl Jung game theory. Basically, it breaks the 16 personalities into the 8 main ones, and it shows here are all the stressors that absolutely stress the hell out of all of these types. Here's how it shows up. Here's how to restore balance. And here's stuff that can help with. And it is hilariously accurate, because for me, it's, oh, wow, I'm overly focusing on details. Why am I concerned about these 3 or 4 details when I'm really stressed about this deadline when they really don't specifically matter?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Why is it that the quiet, logical guy in the room is having emotional outbursts at everybody all the time for the last week? And it's like every single one, like here are the particular stressors, like whether it's a violation of morals, or whether it's too much sensory data at the same time, or they've been overbooked with meetings because they're an introvert and they are completely exhausted from having to people all the time. And it's and that was my contribution, because everybody made very good general contributions. So that's my individual contribution there, and I'll put it up there. And if there's the one common theme, gee, David mentions a common theme from everybody said here. Shocker. Like, I haven't done that before, Matt. It's knowing yourself and knowing your own particular things and how you act out, and working on, by knowing yourself, knowing when your own breaks and emotional times are that you need to be able to take time off. So my contribution there.
Great. All right. So knowing yourself, those things for yourself. All right. I think you also brought up some of these personality types that we can look at. What are some of the triggers that are there? Also, when you were talking about that intelligence analyst, this actually points out where burnout can really be insidious, where there is a culture in some of these places. We have a number of people who are veterans who are here. Like, the culture that you have been a part of is like, hey, you got the work in front of you. You just got to do the work. And if you are very personally connected to the mission, that can actually make it that much worse for you, where you're willing to push yourself a lot harder around it. And then you could end up with that 3rd degree burn. So the people who get the 3rd degree burns, a lot of times it's not because they stopped caring about stuff. It's because they cared a whole heck of a lot. And so we do have to worry about the relationship that those people have with their work.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Especially if it's a caring profession. I mean, there's been plenty of write-ups about how certain intelligence agencies are very horrible with their people. It took them 10 years after they started shoving their intelligence analysts to doing stuff before realizing burnout might be an issue. So 2015. And the way she described it was, she said, oh yeah, we're looking at, she was 04 in Iraq when things were really bad. And she said, every single attack, they've got the face of the kid on the wall there, and they've got all the photos, and we have to analyze the photos. Do you think any of that's censored?
Yeah, that's brutal.
Every single day. And she said, and for her, and remember, moral injury can be almost as bad as stress. For her, the moral injury was that as an intelligence analyst, she knew, I need more people to die and more attacks to happen to identify the pattern. But I also, and as much as I need that from an intellectual standpoint to want to happen, I am also seeing the face of literal teenagers, 18 and 19-year-olds, every day in their flag draped coffin up there. And that dichotomy in weight was never addressed and never treated.
Yeah.
That nobody got support for her for, even helping hand of, I'm sorry you have to deal with that. And, but she's trying to save American lives. So when I tell you some of these jobs, a lot of these people, just because they're trucking on, a lot of these people need support, even if they don't speak up about it.
There you go. Okay, so this is a perfect segue for us thinking about, we thought about some of the signals for us individually. What about seeing it in other people? Katerina, how can you see some of these things in other people? Particularly, like, there's going to be some stuff that people might want to hide, but what do you look for when you see that stress is kind of being something that's overcoming their natural tendencies?
So you said it well, like a lot of, I'm just thinking about my team members, they want to hide that they are under the stress, because especially for the peak when we are the busiest, you know, you have to be ready for the job, you have to be ready for work. So they're like, I'm okay with every task you're giving to me. So they're like, but I immediately just assume that they will be stressed. So I'm just trying to, I don't know, talk one face to face, because I think it's better than like got in a group. A lot of people are not feeling, let's say, it's better for them to speak with me personally than sharing with a group. I know that sometimes I want to like speak with one specific person and not sharing with the whole group what I have to say, what I'm stressed about. So like my first thing is assumption, because I know when we have a lot of work job and a job to do, I just assume that they will be stressed. So first of all, I'm just thinking of themselves. Like right now I have the girl, she's working really hard. So I'm just asking them a lot of questions. So like my point of view is like ask them, because so far I have been relying on them approaching me. I know that they are relying on me, but sometimes, you know, you want to be tough for themselves and you want to show up that you're a good worker. So for me, so far it was better asking the questions face to face, and then I get that response that they are under the stress, not only by the work, but personally, they have a lot of, I don't know, work on their shoulders or whatsoever. So like asking questions to have face to face to conversation was something that really paid off for me and my team, actually.
Okay, great. So just making the assumption like, hey, there's going to be stressful stuff that's going on here.
Yeah.
I'm making sure that as the manager, I'm watching out for it. Christy, what about you? What do you watch out for with other people?
I watch out for loss of patience and listen to what people are complaining about. I find when it gets to what I would consider to be more small complaints or petty complaints, it tells me that there's something else going on. So we can dig into some of those things. But to me, those are early indicators that there's something else going on. If we can name what that is, we can then figure out a step towards it. But that to me is one of my earliest warning signs with folks.
Okay. Yeah, and presumably the small complaints are something they usually don't waste their time complaining about as well. It's just like,
yeah, a change.
Why did they get us sprinkled donuts again?
Yeah,
it's like, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Annie, what about you? What do you look for within for other folks?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, you know, first and foremost, I look for reclusiveness when people who are typically engaged are going and are heads in. And I know, I recognize that with myself. When I get overwhelmed, you know, I tend to kind of just shield off. And so definitely pay attention to that. And then people's like sharpness. You know, I do think I wanted to take a second and just comment on David's just reflection on how like mental health and resilience, how that directly correlates to the time period it takes to hit burnout. And so I think that if you're aware of your teammates and you have an idea of like what their resiliency pillars are, like how their physical health is, if you have any indicators of mental health, you kind of know what type of, how long they can withhold high periods of stress. So if you can have awareness of those other, you know, family pillars, right? Like what's their personal pillar. If any of those singular pillars start to weaken, you know that that's going to lead to that third degree burnout quicker than it might otherwise. So
okay, yeah. So again, I kind of mentioned this up front. You didn't end up in this job by accident. It's because you actually had some of the sense on what the network looks like for other people naturally. But what are those things that you can look out for? What's going on with that individual person? You're saying, hey, I'm taking a look a level deeper. What are those other pillars that they've got that support them? out there.
Yep.
Margaret, what do you look for in folks that are showing off that they might be getting on the burnout side of things?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what folks have said here are certainly signs. I think on my team or in past experiences that I've had, and a little bit is the same with myself, right? Is if folks are kind of like leaking everywhere, like I use the term leaking, right? So like they're just throwing spaghetti at the wall, they're not holding things together, they're not, having like cohesive, like coherent thought process, like just that piece that like overwhelm is happening. And maybe I see this because I have poor boundaries myself, but like if I see folks responding to emails at like 10 o'clock at night or, things like that, I'm online at that time. So maybe like that's a different issue altogether. But, like if I'm seeing teammates like trying to, catch up with that and feeling like if they feel like they have to be online at that time, that's probably a sign as well. The other thing I do, and a little bit to like Christy's point, and it's the same thing I do with my kids, right? Like if folks are venting, I'll say like, hey, are you just venting and you just need to vent?
Okay.
Or do you need someone to help you with a solution? Because sometimes people just need to vent, right? And I think all of us in our positions, we're probably fixers, right? So it's like, hey, you just said something, I can get a solution for you. But sometimes the person doesn't want a solution, they just want to air it out and then like walk away and keep doing what they're doing. So, the same thing I do with my kids. I'm like, hey, like, am I just here listening to you just so you can vent and you can like let the garbage out and then we can close the bag and throw it away? Or am I listening to help you with solutions? And a lot of times people are like, oh yeah, like I just want to vent. I know what I need to do. Like I just need to vent this out, and sometimes folks are like, no, I really need a thought partner in figuring out this process or this issue or solution. So.
Yeah. So as the chief of staff, typically you're a trusted person within the organization, right? You are going to be a natural person for people to come to vent, but also to get help on something. So I think being able to distinguish between those two things is pretty powerful. You brought up doing emails at 10 at night. I think that you guys probably do a pretty good job of figuring out what a baseline of work looks like for people. And so recognizing that unusual behavior. With COVID, what we saw is like the boundaries diminished pretty substantially. People needed a more flexible working schedule. And so therefore there are some people that they're going to work their best by emailing 10 at night, but then the expectation can creep out for absolutely everyone that's around us. So, understanding, hey, how are we monitoring these people? What is the unusual stuff that we're seeing?
And I'll say for myself, like I noticed I did that, which then what you just said, right, makes the team feel like they have to respond. So I really make it a point, right, to like use the delay send. So I may be working at 11 o'clock at night because that's when my schedule worked for me, but I don't want people to feel like, oh my God, like Margaret was working at 11 o'clock at night, I'm supposed to be responding. So in this way, it doesn't land in their inbox until 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock the next morning. And I still got done what I need to get done, but now they're not overwhelmed either. So
Perfect. We've got at 10 minutes to the hour, we're going to go around and say, what's one thing that you guys took away on an individual basis from the conversation today? So start thinking about that as we go through. We'll attack one more question before we do that. Christina, all right, so we said, hey, we're recognizing some of the signals with other people. Margaret said, here's how I'm going to change some of my behaviors. I'm putting on the delay send, things like that. When we see this going on with other people, and also like Margaret said, we can ask, do you need help on this or do you just need a vent? What are the things that we can do for them? How do we actually help them in the moment? And perhaps how do we help them increase their resilience overall so that they don't get into that situation as quickly?
That's a great question. And I want to say for me, I believe that a lot of this work needs to happen in preparation. So before we get to that burnout point, we need to constantly be working with our teams. As leaders, we're kind of in charge, but also we're like moms and dads to our team members. So how do you build up their resilience before they come to the boiling point? What do you do? How do you build those connections on the team? So there's openness and people feel free to share when they need help? How do you build a culture of trust on your team so people do not come to the point of boiling? Also, how do you model and encourage people to take time off when they need it? And how do you help people find the meaning in what they do? How do you connect them back to their purpose and remind them always what the purpose of their work is, no matter how busy it is and how much under pressure they are?
Okay, so as chiefs of staff, typically you are culture carriers within the organization, which means you potentially get an outsized influence here on changing the culture. A lot of what Christina was just talking about is, hey, how do we have a culture of recognizing and helping with prevention around this? How can it become apparent that I am providing care so that we get to this earlier? And I think part of what Katerina was saying before is like, hey, I'm assuming that people are under stress. Okay, we're assuming people can have stress. How do we actually help them back off around that? Christy, what else would you add in terms of like, all right, we're seeing challenges here. What can we do to help people out?
One strategy that I've tried with some success is naming it with folks. Here's what I'm noticing specifically. And maybe it's a change in a behavior or something like that. What have you noticed? But it starts a conversation that I think goes down a productive path to even recognize whatever stage someone might be in and how we can move in a slightly different direction.
Okay, perfect. And that's exactly what we talked about. When you're feeling stressed with yourself, if you can name it, you've actually been able to back off some and be able to see like, all right, what do I do next then? And you're helping them to back off and saying like, all right, I see this in you. They're like, okay, someone's seeing it. Gives them a chance to disengage from that behavior and contemplate what they can do about it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Great. Josh, what about you? What would you say, like, how do we, and let's move to the building resilience aspect. We're saying like, hey, in the moment we might help you with these things. How can we help people have some of the tools that will help them longer term to be able to shoulder some of the blow, to be more resilient?
I think, one of the things I try and do is give people responsibility, especially like in downtimes, maybe when I'm not feeling, I think it was Laszlo Bach that said give people a little bit more responsibility than you're comfortable with giving them. And I think when things aren't crazy stressful, that's a perfect time to do that, to try and help build their confidence and some of their resilience. So that's something I try and do, not just, okay, the house is on fire, right? Like, let's try and do this when everything's going well, and kind of pass some of that responsibility around and give people an opportunity to grow and expand kind of their skill set.
Great. Okay. Everything doesn't need to be the building's on fire. And if we're challenging people just a little bit beyond where they're comfortable, that's actually helping them to learn more than something's exceptionally difficult. They got no shot at being able to accomplish it, or it's going to take absolutely everything that they had to do it. Margaret, anything that you'd add in terms of, hey, if we're trying to build resilience within a team member, within the team overall, what would you suggest?
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes like being clear, right? It's like, I think a little bit of what Christy said, like, hey, I'm noticing this. Like, I'm noticing this slipping, or I'm noticing you seem to be have a hard time meeting this deadline, or I'm noticing, whatever it is. And like being able to have that like hard conversation. I think all too often people don't want to have like those hard conversations or the uncomfortable conversations. But I think if you approach it from like, hey, like we're all here to help, right? Like we're all here rowing in the same direction. And I think I would assume this group is similar in like, I'll take on probably more monkeys onto my desk in like a short term to be like, hey, like, what kind of help do you need? Like, do you just need some space? Do you need a thought partner? Like, I notice these things are slipping. Like, do you need something taken off your desk? Right. And then like, kind of like what Josh is saying, like when times are calmer, like be able to say, hey, like, how can we build in a process? Like, how can we automate something that will make things easier for you? Like the next time especially if you're in like a cyclical situation, like the next time that this is going to happen, because it's going to happen next quarter, or it's going to happen, you know, this time next year. But I think just like being honest about it, I think a lot of times we're just like, oh, so-and-so's having a hard time, they'll figure it out.
Right.
But then everyone's talking about them behind their back, and then doesn't create a good culture in an environment.
Right. Well, and so the interesting thing about the chief of staff is we are the ones who end up picking up the trash a lot, because the trash is there and it needs to get picked up. So you're doing a good job around that. You're saying, hey, what can I do to take that off you? We're increasing our own risk sometimes with that. So that's just something like, again, high performers particularly at risk. You all, by virtue of what you do, put you particularly at risk as well. Annie, anything you would add in terms of what can help us build resilience?
Yeah, I think just kind of carrying on what Margaret said, I think the more that you can, when people are feeling overwhelmed, they're typically going to be perceiving everything as a threat. They're struggling to analyze their surroundings and to understand like what is truly what do I need to attack, and what can be put on the back burner. And so the more that you can take time and help them understand their surroundings, help them understand and see your lens of what is the true priority, what can be pushed back, and then and just being like true and honest with folks. And I think, you know, if to help build people's resilience, just help them understand the world around them. And then also the more, you know, when you figure out that maybe the stressors that they're perceiving might not all just be work related, just being vulnerable and talk about your own personal experiences, right? Like be human.
Okay.
I think can make you an exceptionally strong leader and help folks outside of just work related stressors.
Great. All right. So we're going to do going around the horn. What's one thing that you took away from today? David, you get to start us off. What'd you take away?
I think my big one was, you know, really making sure that you keep an eye out for other people's stability there. I wanted to add something. It was, if you ever watched the miniseries The Pacific, Eugene Sledge, which was it's a brilliant series. Eugene Sledge, he was a Marine and he wrote his book, and that was one of the things that added to it. And he wrote a thing about Captain Haldane, which was his favorite captain, and he wrote in his book, you know, I assumed our captain was immortal and he got killed. And he said, we felt forlorn and lost. It was the worst grief I endured during the entire war. The years since haven't lessened any. It was like losing a parent we depend upon for our security, not our physical security, because we knew that was a commodity beyond reach in combat, but our mental security. We had lost our leader and friend. Our lives would never be the same. And I think, to me, that's an important point to not discount, no matter how trying the conditions, the mental security that you can offer. That even for soldiers literally getting killed in combat, being the mental stability and the mental security and the emotional safe space in a world of chaos, of layoffs, of even the worst circumstances, that what you can provide for other people can be one of the most powerful preventions of burnout, literally, even as people around you are dying. So being able to provide that, I think, is my biggest takeaway.
All right, great. Sylvia, what was your takeaway today?
I think as the chief of staff, having empathy is really key. Being able to recognize the signals when your peer is behaving abnormal or unusual, having the patience to actually help them understand, you know, the maybe the misunderstanding of what their expectations are. I think all that would actually be helpful with regards to how the peer can improve on their work.
Great. Drew, what did you take away?
Number one is confirm what you think you know for yourself and for others, and just to acknowledge and recognize in self first, and then recognize and then have reflections back to them to say, this is what I'm feeling or seeing or otherwise. And then and then confirm back to them what that is for the team.
Great. Christy, what did you take away?
A reminder that burnout is contagious. So how important it is to be catching these early, because it does spread.
Great. Josh, what was your takeaway?
There's something you said, Matt, basically talking about the lions on the Serengeti and how you basically either got eaten or you survived and escaped. And so how can I facilitate that release? Maybe just taking a walk. I used to do that in the
Okay.
Pentagon. So walk the yard, we called it, to just go walk the center of it, to just get out
Right.
and break the cycle a little bit.
Okay. Good stuff. Margaret.
I don't know if we curse or cuss on here, but the piece of Drew's comment of like recording his call, kind of the SFD, right? The shitty first draft of something. I often am the opposite. I like strong arm emotions. I think through things. I don't really feel through things. So I can often come across sounding a little like disengaged or unemotional in my decision making. And so sometimes I have to bring in some feeling to it. And so like, so I think that like doing that phone call to be like, ooh, maybe I should add a little
Yeah. Right.
personality to that. Yeah, because sometimes I go the opposite way of, hey, I'm here to, right, like protect the organization. And sometimes that means unemotional decisions get made that people have emotional reactions to. So yeah, I like David's or Drew's idea, sorry, of the like maybe record yourself and be like, oh, maybe I could add a little emotion to that or a
Okay.
little feeling
Maybe a
to
plug
it.
for AI too. You could talk to ChatGPT about
I
this
could
stuff
talk to
too.
ChatGPT and have them come up with a script for me. Take
There
this
you
and
go.
add a little personal emotion
Yeah.
to it.
Nice.
But I do it in my personal life too. If you ask my kids, they're probably like, yeah, like mom's a little unemotional on things. So
All right. Annie, what was your takeaway?
It was really helpful just to go through. I'm working on a fully remote situation right now, and so only seeing the team one time a year. And so I have to be very deliberate and thoughtful about how to reach out and to sense those times when people are actually hitting burnout, because I'm not going to have those physical contacts when you walk into a room and see people.
Yeah. High degree of difficulty there. All the interactions that you have, you got to be putting that much more weight on it.
100%.
Christina, what was your takeaway today?
One thread that I see through everybody's mentioning this in some capacities: awareness of ourselves, and then also awareness of about people around yourself. It's just so important to tune in with what's going on. And I'm also in a fully remote situation, so it's even harder, but it's so important to be deliberate about it.
Great. Katerina.
Similar as Christina said, I put here one question: what is the emotion now? So it's not good only to change the focus, but also to try to determine what I'm actually feeling, because sometimes it can be stress, even though you think you're sad or whatsoever, or it can be a mix of combinations. So it's really getting back to yourself, introspective part, so you can like, okay, I assume this is the emotion that I'm feeling, so let's see what we can do about it. And also sharing examples of like how we experience the same stressful situations, but each of us have different kind of way of handling with that. So it's like always to hear the other side of the stories.
Great. Quentin, close us out. What'd you take away?
I think my takeaway is realizing that in our roles as chiefs of staff, we have responsibility to hold space. And I think that's hold space for diverse thought, and within in this context of this conversation, hold space for stress and shaping and other having other people share their frustrations. I think also, and I'm looking at the deck, I think in our role as a vision Sherpa, I think we often are the holders of context for the organization. So when our colleagues or folks that we support in our organization are experiencing stress, part of our opportunity is to offer context to help them process how they're perceiving their stressors. And so that's a key takeaway for me as well.
Awesome. All right. So third Friday of every month, open office hours. We're very happy to have you here. if you would like to participate in our other office hours, it is the membership organization for those other non-third Fridays. Just reach out. Let us know if you want to do it. It's about $50 a month. We want to make this affordable to all you, but this is a really important community to us. Thank you for sharing the time with us this Friday. I always take away a ton of learnings from this. And so really appreciate you all being here, and have a great weekend.
Thanks, you too.
See you guys. Bye.
Have a good weekend.
Have a great weekend.